Hi, I'm Peri, and I am the current Vice President of the New Paltz LARP Club in the spring semester of 2015. And today I'm going to be talking about villains and how to make them. So there's a lot of stuff to talk about villains. There are entire books written about villains, entire books written from the perspective of villains. People like villains. People like good villains. People like bad villains. People like the bad guys in general, and they are really fun to make, and oftentimes they can be more popular than the good guys by a long shot. All you have to look at is our modern movies and our current books. People like villains. People like Loki. People like Cannibal. People like these types of characters. So, how do you make a good one? The first thing to understand is that a LARP is not a book, and it's not a movie. And I've said this before many times, and I'll say it again, because it's important to remember. Villains in the LARP world and tabletops do not get speeches. They do not get people standing in awe of them. They do not get... Basically, they do not have talking as a free action, because no matter what you do, there will be someone who sneaks up behind you to try and, waylay you to death, or hit you with a spell, or just tackle you to the ground, depending on the type of system you're using. Why let a villain speak when you can kill them? So that's where you have to start realizing that LARP is not the same as a book, and that is where the differences come in, and that's where I come in. Ha-ha. So, with that in mind, though, if you know how to write a good villain in a story, you're probably already halfway there. So, there's two aspects I want to take here, which is the PC villain and the NPC villain. And, because both involve different things. So first of all, the PC villain. PC villain can come in one of two ways. One, evil party. Everyone's evil. You're evil. Or, you're evil, and everyone else is good. So in the first thing, you have evil within the evil party. This is probably the easiest to do, because it really will come kind of naturally. You'll just have a case of all characters acting immoral, so you just go along with the bandwagon. There are some issues, though. It's a good idea to know what type of evil campaign it is and know what the limit is. What does this evil campaign allow? What type of debauchery is allowed? Are you allowed to mutilate bodies? Are you allowed to kill puppies? Are you allowed to mug people on the streets? Or is it solely a professional, we'll summon demons and have demons do our bidding type of evil? Make sure you know what type of evil it is that you're going to get into before you make a character that is evil, because it can often ruin the fun for some people. Also, keep in mind, being evil can sometimes be very uncomfortable for people. You might end up playing a character that hits someone's neuroses, and that is a problem. So always keep an ear out and an eye out for what you do when you're playing these characters. Also, keep in mind, villains oftentimes have these issues where they'll have stereotypes or cliches that are laden in really unfortunate prejudice and stereotypes. The asexual villain, the sex-crazed villain, the mentally disabled villain, the physically disabled villain. These are fine, but not. In a LARP setting, when you're the PC, you actually can be cliched because you're not the only representative. However, it's a good thing to keep in mind, and if you continually do stuff like this, other people might notice, and they might not be too happy about it. Usually, if you're going for evil in an evil campaign, you just want to make sure that you know what you're getting into, what the theme is, so you're not all one shade of evil. Now, I'm not a big fan of D&D, but the whole idea of lawful evil, chaotic evil, neutral evil, there's actually some ground of it of there's a spectrum of evilness. So, do you want to be the guy who's evil because he doesn't really care and he just wants money? Do you want to just be the person who doesn't care at all, or really cares, or the person who has a goal and whatever reaches that goal, or they just want bad stuff to happen? Alright. Now, what if you're the evil PC in a good campaign? Well, there's two types of those as we subdivide further and further into this amazing adventure. The first is everyone knows you're evil. You are that token evil teammate that everyone laughs at. Well, the problem with this is that depending on how evil you are, it's quite possible you'll only be kept alive via metagaming. So, you have a paladin or some good person, and then you have you, who is this demon person. In real life, they'd probably kill you on sight, and then move on with their lives. But in real life, they know the person. Maybe they want to see this character. Maybe they like you. Maybe they don't want to ruin it. Maybe you're a newbie and they're a veteran and they know that if they do that, they'll get in trouble. So you don't end up getting killed, and you keep going. This is something that people will usually grant some segue to, but it also depends on the situation. I went to a LARP where it didn't matter if you came in as a necromancer, they would kill you if they found out. First PC, not first PC, first day, not first day, you would die. And that is one of the ways to do it, especially if there's a very strong divide between the player world and the GM world. In our LARP, we tend to have more leeway. There are ways to test characters for certain attributes, and we tend to not put every single character through the ringer right away because we feel that it limits characters and would also limit character builds. So you have to take certain skills. This is a personal choice, however. Not everyone's going to do it. Some people really don't like the idea of metagaming. So with this in mind, what does that mean? Well, like I said last time, know what type of group you're going into. Probably not a good idea to go evil character first time in this world. Learn what they accept. Learn what they don't accept. And what I find is the best thing is be really, really good in everything but being evil. And what I mean by this is follow orders. Don't stir up trouble. If they can accept that you are an abomination or a horrible person as face value, it's been accepted, then as long as you don't break the rules from then on, you actually will have a lot of standing. They can't get you. This will obviously depend on the situation, and in tabletops where you have much smaller groups, it might just be that they get sick of you and kill you, but it is something to keep in mind. Also, if you play them as affably evil, people will tend to like them. If they're nice, people tend to like characters, and if they're entertaining, they'll let themselves be biased because it's fun to watch. Another way to do it is just be over-the-top evil, but evil in a really incompetent way. I'm going to be killing this flower now! Mwahaha! Stomping on your garden. Yes. But, if you actually do want to play the dark, evil one, in a roleplay that is predominantly good, you should probably think of a reason to do it. A good one would be, they've been cursed. That's always a good one. Cursed, forced to do good deeds. Another one is, they were captured, and something like that, or arrested. Common one in our LARP is criminals. Criminals have to serve a sentence, and one way to do that is in our military system, which is where our LARP takes place. So then you can be evil, or at least not good, and then you slowly work your way in. Another thing to do is start off evil, but turn good. But if you want to be actually evil, you're better off not being evil. You are better off doing it in such a way that people don't notice. Maybe you're nice or kind of grumpy, but you're actually really selfish, and you will screw people over whenever they try and sell you things or buy things. They just don't know it. Maybe you are secretly giving information out. Or maybe you are incognito and you have sold your soul to a demon and you are planning on murdering everyone in their sleep once you hit a high enough level. That is also something you can do. And if you do this, the most important thing you can do is never tell anyone out of character. Do not tell people out of character what you are doing. I don't care how metagaming anti this world is, do not tell them. Because then they will look for it. And then they will know. Also, I find personally that people who want to play the long game on this have to have two things. One, it's actually better if they're quiet. You know, people who are quiet and don't get much attention, and often struggle to get the attention that they might want in a LARP, those people have it the easiest. You don't pay attention to them. They can be evil, and you don't know because you assume they're just doing their quiet generic character who's doing quiet generic things. Also, they have to be willing to play the same character every week or every month or every year and know that they might not get anything accomplished. They might be stuck with a facade over a facade over a facade and have to watch anything. And their payoff might be really far off or non-existent. In a LARP setting, in a tabletop, it's quite possible you'll perm before anything happens. And that is something you're going to have to make peace with if you want to make an evil character, is that your plan might never be enacted, your plan might never happen, you have to play the long game, and you have to enjoy the long game, or at least be dedicated enough to do it. So, of the player characters, there is a lot of variety there, and what are some ways to do this? One, find ways to have fun with them that aren't completely evil, especially if it's in a good campaign. Maybe they really like fetch quests, maybe they want to, like, be a really good herbologist. Stuff that can pad the area, so either A, you're fooling people into thinking you're not evil because, oh, look, here's this other quirk, clearly well developed, or you're distracting people from the sake that you're evil, and therefore they're like, oh, well, you're not that evil, oh, you. Or alternatively, it's hilarious because you're this evil Dark Lord who wants to pick daisies. Triple win situation, in my opinion. It's also a good idea to avoid telling as opposed to showing. It is easy to assume that you can make a very messed up character. It is easy to assume that your character is the utmost evilness. This is kind of hard to depict, though. Because to be really evil, you need to have the mannerisms down, and also, everyone knows this is fictional. Everyone knows that someone is doing something behind the scenes. So there is a layer of, we expect you to be evil. If you say you're going to play an evil character, especially in an evil campaign, we expect you to be messed up. We expect you to do horrible things. So, merely saying, oh, my character, like, once slaughtered a kitten and put it on the flag for all the children to see, and he laughed at them. That doesn't sound evil. That sounds ridiculous. You also have the fact that when people go into, like, really evil stuff, they tend to go to the very same things. Assault, brutal murder, and rape. And the problem with that is, one, these can be real issues, and players might not like it, but also, it makes them all the characters the same, and it makes it very uncomfortable. We have morals in the real world, and even in an evil campaign, characters will probably come off as not even evil, but just uncomfortable if you try and go for direct evilness like that, especially if you say it. If you go and talk about it, that is the worst possible thing you can do. The best thing is subtlety. Know what your character did, and have them act accordingly. But don't make it obvious. So if your character really, like, did something horrible, like to the point that your LARP might censor it, or your tabletop might censor it, depending on the thing, then that's fine. You don't have to say what happened. You just have to make sure, one, the DM or GM knows, and two, that it won't ever have to come up, but it can affect how you interact in character. For instance, I had an evil character who would alter people to make them really pretty and, like, smooth their skin out and stuff, against their will. So one thing I did is I always made a point to compliment people on their skin or like on their looks and tell them they were very beautiful. But only at certain people. I only complimented certain people. Now this seems really minor, like that's not something evil people would do. But it was one way to convey it. And when later on people found out what I did, it actually did have a negative effect. And they realized that all those seemingly innocent things I'd said was kind of dark, kind of messed up. Subtlety is usually the best way to go for the bigger evil stuff, especially if you want it to be taken seriously. Talking about it is desensitizing. If you talk about how you slaughtered an entire town, what? That's a statistic. Alright, you slaughtered a town. I slaughtered 10 towns. I slaughtered 50 towns. I slaughtered an entire nation! I slaughtered every single cat. It's an arms race. It's not that interesting, especially when you might be in an evil campaign or be with other evil characters. I slaughtered a village. We don't care. The gods are descending upon us and killing us. Stop showboating. So, if you're gonna be evil, think of good reasons for it. And not good as in, like, justified reasons. Like, oh, my mother died, now I'm sad. No. Think of emotional, good backstory reasons why your character might do this. Now, this only applies if you want your villain to be memorable. You might want to just have fun, put on your daggers and just stab people because it's funny, and that's okay. If you want a villain that's, like, memorable in a character-building way, then you want to put effort into their backstory. It's not good enough to just say, they were evil, Same way it's not good to have your sad character's good backstory be, my parents are dead. Put effort into it. Put emotional gripping behind it. Think of stuff that we don't normally go to when we want to think of evil characters. There's so many obvious stuff, and that'll always be what first comes to your mind, and you need to avoid those and tell them, no, I'm going to do better than you. With that being said, though, a shock value can have its uses. Just use it right. And if you do play an evil character, especially in a good campaign, always make sure you have the outside understanding of what's going on. Especially if you hurt characters, torture characters, or in general cause their life misery and pain. It's a good idea to find out how the players feel about it, especially with torture, because not everyone's okay with torture, and it's a good idea to get that. Next part are NPCs. Oh my god, okay. Where do I begin? Tabletops usually have all NPCs played by the GM. LARPs aren't like that. And while I usually kind of conflate the two because I know that not many people LARP and a lot of people tabletop, I'm going to be talking about a very strict divide in LARP. So tabletop players, just go away. Yeah. No matter how well you write a character, unless you play them yourself, they will turn out differently. Villains kind of require a lot of subtlety sometimes, and people who are not talented in playing more than one archetype can often end up playing a character in a way that you never wanted them to be played as. So you might have a character who is mysterious benefactor, and they might be harsh but forgiving. But the way the person plays them, they're just harsh, and their forgiving seems petty. And suddenly, every character hates them so much, so that they think they're the main villain. They think they're the ones who should die, so when the actual villain is, like, trying to steal from them, they want to help the villain. What do you do then? Well, you can't tell the person, you suck at playing this character, how dare you, we're gonna retcon the past couple months, stop it. You can't do that. One, you can't retcon in a LARP. What's done is done. You never really should retcon. Retcon should be an exception to almost no rule. And two, you can't tell someone that. You can't tell that they failed so utterly to convey what you wanted that they need you to stop. That's horrible. It's rude. And even if it's true, it's really mean. So what do you do? Well, one is you have to roll with the punches. Two, you might want to talk to the person, but not in a way that makes it seem like they're doing a bad job. So roll with the punches. Okay, they think they're evil now. I should probably set up a situation where I use that bias against them. Very purposely so, and make the road easy enough to follow. Also, I can set up a scripted scene. I can take the person aside and set up a very specific scene I want them to do, and explain to them how I want them to act. And say, hey, I noticed the players are misinterpreting you. I think we might want to make some stuff clear. Let's go over this. That way, it puts the fault on the players. And it could be the fault of the players. It's not always the fault of the person doing the NPC role. It can be, but it's not always is. And, the players should understand that the NPC messed up, and the NPC should understand that the players misinterpreted. Simple PR. So you have that issue, where characters who are supposed to be not liked, but not evil, misinterpreted as evil. Then you have the other one, which is my personal favorite, is the villain, who becomes kind of your buddy. How does this happen? Well, it's a combination of things. We often want recurring villains. The person who shows up and is evil and can smirk and, like, no one can do anything, and then they leave for another time until they finally get defeated in a grand climax. Well, there's a few downsides to that. One is people might think they can never attack them. So when it's time to attack them, or time to interrogate them, they'll stop, because they'll think, well, they had infinite health before, and infinite defense then. Who's to say it changed now? Can't do anything. This is why it's always good to give your villains stats. Or, alternatively, my personal favorite is if you're going to have, like, a reoccurring villain like that, think of them to show up either, like, in a holographic way, or maybe by possessing other people. Possessing people also allows other people to try their hand at playing a character, but that can lead to many messy issues, as I mentioned before, where people might interpret them differently, and they might say stuff that is not planned and not canon, because, you know, improv. So, you give them stats, and then... Well, it turns out that a few weeks ago you gave someone an artifact that insta-kills them and you never gave the villain a resistance. What do you do? Do you just throw away that villain? Do you no-sell it? And then that person just wasted an artifact and is basically being told, your job in this fictional world doesn't matter. The railroad is all that matters. You wasted that because you didn't use it when I wanted you to use it. Unfortunately, when it comes to that, you kind of have to take it. Your best bet is to plan ahead at all times. Also, if you're going to have your villain be mortal, like completely mortal, no strings attached, so it's not like, oh, well, they got banished, so they'll show up in a year, or, they'll reform, they'll regenerate, they always do. You better think of a reason why they're not going to be killed on sight, or at least not attempted to be attacked by someone who's stronger than them. Maybe it's because they need help. Maybe it's because, they might not be evil at first, or there's a bigger villain and they want to team up with us. Or they have a nice, large army, so you say, yes, you attack them with it. And then their army gets in the way and 50 of them die. Now there's 1,000 people with spears pointing towards you. However, this leads to a downside. If you have a villain constantly show up, they might actually not be seen as a villain anymore. Now, this might seem a bit weird, because, well, you had your previous character, your dark, grumpy character, be seen as evil, and they showed up a lot. And the reason is because, we like consistency. People like it when they get what they expect. So, if you have this person who's just chilling around, and they're evil, they want to kill all of you, they're going to destroy you, eat your bone marrow, and whatever other gory bits you can think of, and they're honest about it. Well, we're going to trust them in a weird way. If they don't lie, we assume they're not going to lie at any other point. We'll assume they're evil, we'll assume they have their own motivations, but we're not going to assume that they're going to lie. And it's a really hard bias to overcome. It can be done well. You just need to kill people or have devastating consequences. But if you have a villain who is going to be sticking around in such a way, or reoccurring as they laugh at your danger, it's quite possible they'll end up turning to the bard drinking buddy, as opposed to the villain. Now, this might seem ridiculous, like, that won't happen, but I guarantee you, if you have an evil person show up consistently enough to the point that they can have conversations about unrelated topics, then there's probably going to be some weird trust going on. Because people will also probably like the character at some point. They'll find the character entertaining, and if they don't, well, that might be a problem. But people tend to like villains, and people tend to like smarmy asshole villains. So they'll probably like them, and they'll probably want to stick around, and they'll probably ask them questions, or want to egg them on, or fight them. And then you might have people who get attached to it and then decide, I don't want you to kill this character even though they killed your father, because I like coming to this event. I like coming to these missions and seeing them do this. I like seeing them do that. It's a highlight. In short, there's a lot of ways to make a villain go wrong. Now, as I mentioned before, LARP's not real life, so you have the whole issue of a speech or something. And in D&D, I aim an arrow. I roll for initiative. Start combat. Haha. Or in LARP, where they're talking and suddenly you throw a spell back at them and hit them with your sword 50 times. So, how do you do that? How do you make a speech? Well, the classic example is a shield. Just magical shield up, then magical shield goes down. However, once again, if you have spells or something that's supposed to, like, get rid of magic, well, why doesn't it work on this one? Another one is a cutscene. And a cutscene is basically, the characters aren't there, but we still see it. We see it, and then we go into it. The problem with this is that it often means the characters don't know it, but they'll probably act like they do because the player saw it. Another thing to do is have it be that we see it, but it's not direct. So maybe they're on a TV screen. Maybe we get a vision of it. Maybe they're in the clouds and we see it. There are many ways to do it. Also, the army works well, especially if you have a general. And you can also have the fact of, alright, you roll that. You aim that arrow at them. You roll for initiative. It flies, and it misses. Oh, you rolled not 20? Okay. It hits him, goes down, everyone looks at you, they shoot you with a barrage of arrows, and you die. TPK. Good day, sir. I mean, that's a bit extreme. But there are ways to ensure it doesn't happen. Basically, if you don't want NPCs to be immediately slaughtered, make sure that there's more than one. Make sure that there is many of them. And even if they can't see them, ensure there's wave battles with LARPers. Wave battles are a pain. How to make a good villain is tough, as I've said before. And it ultimately comes down to practice. And a lot of the stuff I'm saying now comes from my own experiences. I've seen villains go really wrong. I've seen villains get really popular to the point that no one wants to attack them. I've seen bad PCs. I've been in an evil campaign before. I have seen everything I've talked about. So I can say that it is much easier to make a villain liked than you think, and it's much easier to make a good person hated than you think. And it's a good idea to figure out exactly who you want and figure out exactly what you want to do with it. Another example of a problem was, I was in a mission where everyone knew who the villain was because of a mistake, where we were going to have a red herring, but the person in the NPC role never mentioned the important line that to imply they were the bad guy. So we were not given any other options. So we all knew who it was because there was only one option left, the one person who would roleplay their role correctly. And she actually had been the villain, so sucks. What do you do then? Well, what we did was, we made a minor twist where it turned out that she was a doppelganger. She'd actually replaced the original person to kind of make it so that it didn't seem so obvious. Now, is this a Band-Aid? Yes. Did it make people surprised? No. But it was a LARP. We had to understand what had happened. We had to understand that we messed up. We were going to have to come up with something, and we still wanted to make it interesting. So yes, we changed things, and that is something to consider for LARP. If something's not going your way, or a twist is really obvious, or no one's seeing it, consider changing it. Consider rewriting stuff. Consider fixing stuff. Even if it seems like an obvious Band-Aid to you, or when you talk about it, I can guarantee you that players will not see it as that way, as long as you keep it seamless. Don't complain about it. Don't get annoyed when people break your plot or try and attack your villains. Work with it. Don't go straight. Always listen to the players in that sense. If they hate your good characters and like your bad characters, punish them for it. Or, alternatively, relook at how you're writing them and decide that maybe they're right. Maybe the character they liked is bad. The character they liked is good, and the character they hate is bad. Of course, that has its other issues. You shouldn't just listen to the players because that's what they want. But it is something to keep in mind. And it is for you, the GM, to critically think and decide what the best course of option is when people are misinterpreting your villains. Now, with this said, this has all been about how to deal with villains that are mishandled, at least in the NPC side, or what to avoid. So how do you make them good? Well, first thing you can do is, it's always good to have a little flair to them. Charisma's never hurt anyone. The cocky asshole is usually a favorite, but it can depend. If you're going to have a big villain, one of the things I highly recommend is going out for makeup and costuming. When you have the big bad fully decked out, people tend to go nuts over it. It's great. Another thing is, give them something unique and signature. Give them something that will make them stand out. So, they have a spell no one else does. They have a special move no one else does. They know something no one else does. What this allows for is a certain element of, oh my god, what is this? I don't know what that is. And it also means they are going to be kind of sought out after, and it will give people new ideas. It also means it doesn't have to be that powerful. It can just be something unique. In our LARP, we tend to have a lot of spell names, so unique spells we tend to do a lot. Another is, if you want an interesting villain, come up with a reason why they tick. Come up, go through all the character developments, set them up, and come up with not one twist, because come up with multiple. Come up with several layers to the villain. Basically, make it so that just because they find out the villain's evil plan, it's not the end of the game. Just because they defeat the villain, it's not the end of the game. Just because you kill the villain, it's not the end of the game. That is more of a strategy for if you want all of it, more of a realistic take, but that is something to keep in mind for challenges. Just because the villain is dead doesn't mean their plans go to waste. Another is, maybe don't have the villain be the big bad. Have the villain be the one to sell them out. Have the villain who's been plaguing them for all this time say, alright, you got me. I'm evil. I've been destroying you. You have every right to kill me, but if you don't, I can tell you everyone else. I can lead you straight to the other bad guys. I get off scot-free, and you win. That's an example. Always just give them options that they might not normally take. Another is, maybe there's two villains fighting over, and one villain says, if you do this for me, I will give you immense power. And it's especially interesting if it's not asked as a group, but individually. Demon deals and demon-like deals are incredibly interesting, because it allows for the moral ambiguity. Have other people around who are evil who aren't part of the main evil crew. Have people reacting. That's the best thing you can do. Have people who are going to be tempted by power to other people in order to fight the bad guys. Basically, villains are interesting when they're not the only villain. And if they are the only villain, well, you better make sure they're really buffed so that when someone uses their special artifact or, hits them really hard, they're not going to go down. Another thing I like about villains is that, they're fun to play, and, you can actually and they can actually oftentimes take a life on their own. I know a few times where bad guy mooks, have just become, these big guys because of the way they're acted and very popular. So that is one way to become a really good villain, is you start off with a funny character, a funny personality, and then that grows and grows, and now you have a big-time villain. So, keep an eye out for people like that. Keep an eye out for the characters who stand out and the NPCs that stand out. And overall, what you want to do is understand that this is a game, and not every game is going to enjoy cops and robbers or the cackling evil villain who can never be good. Especially because in tabletops and LARPs, you have the idea of someone is always evil. Especially orcs or goblins, they're always evil. And if you want to have that, that's fine. But in those worlds, evil doesn't mean what it'll mean here. We define evil as you did something horrible. In those worlds, evil is defined as you are existing in a way that we disagree with. Now, in that world, it's justified because they are inherently evil. But we don't have inherently evil people. So, when you write stories with a world that has inherently evil things, it's really important to keep that in mind, that the morality is going to work differently. And even if the players might act differently, or the same, or not as you would expect, it's a good idea to write the world in such a way that reacts to that. Because, you have the dilemma of, you go to the camp, and there's a bunch of goblin babies who are always chaotic evil. Do you kill them? And, I've said this before, but you need to make a world where it's understood where everything lies, and it's understood how everything works. So if you're going to have something that's always evil, you need to explain why. A good reason for an always evil race, for example, is they destroy the world. Not, like, actively, but they're poisoning the ground where they step on, and trees die in their wake. Or, they were cursed, and they have no free will. That's a common one. The problem with stuff with no free will is, of course, then, well, it's not their fault. With this, to keep in mind, it also can encourage alternative interpretations. Have the villain be someone who wants to liberate the always chaotic evil race. Those are really interesting. If you've ever read the webcomic Order of the Stick, I highly recommend it. It is a very, very, very good depiction of evil characters, and if you are in fact writing a story based on the alignment system, like in D&D, it has a very good example of a chaotic evil character and a lawful evil character, and the way that they can be interpreted, and I think that would be basically good supplemental reading. If you haven't read it and don't want to, basically, work within the world you have, and don't just make another evil sadist. No one is going to be interested by the evil sadist who collects children to do their bidding, and makes them their toys, and, tortures them for fun. It's horrifying, yes, but it's been done so many times. Everyone who makes a bad guy tries to do that character at some point. Just the ultimate evil sadist. Do something different. And if you're going to have a character like that, do it with enough nuance or enough context that no one's going to realize it. Or, make them not the only villain. Have your creepy sadist guy not be the big bad. Have them be big bad number 5 next to 10 other people. So that you can have different archetypes all duking it out and interacting with each other and being one evil family of hatred and anger. Alright. Basically, in case you haven't been able to tell, there's a lot of ways to write an evil character. And your main points are, know your audience, go with the flow, and be careful. And put effort into them. No one cares about a villain that just kind of wobbles away. The MacGuffin villain of way off in the distance fighting people. It's not interesting. It's not fun. And if you're going to do that villain, you better make the plot interesting. And if you're not going to make the plot interesting, you better make the villain interesting, or the characters interesting, or the system interesting. Basically, villains are one of those staples of plot that make the world interesting. So you need a strong villain, or you better have something else that's strong. Okay. I've talked for a while now. I think that covers almost everything I have to say about that. If you have any questions, you can always send us a message. And if you know me in real life, you can talk to me in person. Villains are very fun to do once you get the hang of them. And just remember that you do not have to be cackling evil monster man to be evil. Sometimes to be evil, all you have to do is let stuff happen around you. The apathetic evil is always an easy option for those people who are struggling making one. PC-wise, of course. Alright. Happy LARPing.